I'd gotten used to living alone. Too used to it, probably. The quiet didn't bother me, not anymore, not after the breakup, not after the year of learning what silence felt like when it wasn't shared. My little townhouse felt like mine again, comfortable in its stillness. Nights were my favorite, dim lamps, soft music, tea cooling on the nightstand. That night was supposed to be one of those easy nights. I just finished cleaning the kitchen, brushed my teeth, and slipped into bed with a book I'd been meaning to finish for months. The wind outside was steady but gentle, pushing dry leaves down the street in soft hisses. Everything felt ordinary. Then I heard it. A soft click. Not loud enough to be jarring, just a tiny metallic twitch from the front of the house. Like someone testing a lock. Like fingers gently tugging the handle. I froze, listening hard. My house settled sometimes, expanding and contracting with the temperature. I had convinced myself of that on plenty of nights. But this wasn't that. This was precise. Intentional. I set the book aside and sat up straight, heartbeat thudding in my ears. Another soft click, barely audible. I slipped out of bed and padded down the hallway, keeping to the shadows. The house felt different now, too quiet, like the air itself had stopped moving. When I reached the entryway, I cracked the curtain an inch and peered out. Nothing. Porch empty. Street empty. The nearest street lamp flickered lazily across the pavement. I checked the deadbolt. Firm. Still locked. Probably the wind, I whispered to myself, even though I didn't believe it. I walked back to the bedroom, trying to settle the tension buzzing under my skin. Just to reassure myself, I opened the home security app on my phone. For camera feeds, front porch, driveway, backyard, hallway. All normal. No motion alerts. No figures. No movement at all. I exhaled slowly and crawled back into bed. 5 minutes later, the power went out. Not a flicker. Not a dimming. Just suddenly, void black. The hum of the refrigerator stopped. The heater clicked off. The ceiling fan wound down. Silence dropped into the room so heavy it felt like sound had been sucked out of the walls. My phone screen glowed faintly in my hand, the only light left in the house. Great, I muttered, trying to sound annoyed instead of frightened. Just a blown fuse. But the outage didn't feel like that. It felt deliberate. I opened the camera app again. The feeds were offline, of course they were, but the app still showed the last captured frame before the power cut. I tapped the front porch camera first. My stomach twisted. In the frozen image, a man's face filled the entire frame. Not distant. Not lurking in the background. Inches from the lens. Skin pressed so close it distorted against the glass. His eyes were wide, unblinking, angled upward as if he were staring directly into the sensor. Raindrops dotted his forehead and hair, white streaks of wetness running down his cheeks like tears. His mouth was slightly open, teeth visible. I dropped the phone. It hit the comforter without a sound, but I recoiled like it had burned me. My breath came out hot and sharp. My hands shook so badly I had to press them against my knees. Someone had been at my door. Someone close enough to breathe on the camera. Someone who had tested the lock. I forced myself to pick the phone back up, even though every instinct screamed not to. I zoomed in on the image. His expression wasn't angry. It was curious. Like he was studying something. Me? The camera? The house? Behind him, only darkness. I checked the timestamp. 11:42 p.m. 1 minute before the power outage. I backed away from the screen, suddenly aware of how loud my breathing was in the silence of the powerless house. The darkness pressed in, thick and heavy. Without the hum of appliances, I could hear everything: my heartbeat, the faint wind, the slightest shift in the floorboards. I needed light. I needed police. I needed not to stay in this house another second. But first, I needed to know. I switched to the hallway camera, the last frame captured there. Empty. Backyard camera. Empty. Driveway camera. Empty. Front porch camera again. The man's face stared back. Only now I noticed something else. Behind him, just barely visible in the dark, his hand. Pressed against the door frame. Just above the handle. The same handle that had clicked earlier. I grabbed my keys and shoes, fumbling in the dark. My chest was tight, vision tunneling as panic clawed its way up my throat. I curled my fingers around my phone like it was the only solid thing in the room. I crept down the hallway toward the back door, choosing the exit closest to the fence gate. I didn't dare check the peephole or the front windows. I didn't want confirmation of anything I feared. Halfway down the hall, a sound drifted through the silence. A soft exhale. Not mine. Somewhere near the front of the house. I froze mid-step, breath caught, muscles locked. Another exhale. Slow. Controlled. Close. I didn't think, I acted. I sprinted the last few steps to the back door, unlocked it as quietly as shaking hands will allow, and pushed into the night. Cold air slapped my face. The darkness outside felt colder but safer than the darkness inside. I didn't look back. I ran barefoot across the wet grass, hopped the fence with more adrenaline than grace, and didn't stop running until my legs burned. I didn't stop until I reached the neighbor's porch, banging on their door until they opened it groggy and confused. "Someone's in my house," I gasped. "Call the police." They did. Officers searched every room, every closet, every corner. They found nothing. But the back door, the one I escaped through, was still swinging slightly, as if someone had opened it again after me. And on the inside of my bedroom door, written faintly in the fog my breath had left on the surface when I panicked, was a message. Just 3 words. "I saw you." I'd lived in that little 2-story house for almost a year, long enough to stop noticing the creaks and groans that came with its age. The upstairs stayed mostly unused, just a guest room, an old office full of boxes, and a bathroom I never bothered stocking. I worked long hours and spent most nights downstairs on the couch, half watching TV until sleep crept in. That night was quiet in a way that felt heavier than usual. No wind, no cars outside, no neighbors loudly shutting their doors. Just the soft hum of the refrigerator and the faint buzz of a lamp that was probably on its last leg. I'd reheated leftover noodles, washed the dishes, and settled into the couch with a blanket and a stupidly long video essay playing on my laptop. A normal night. Boring, even. I don't know what made me hear it at first. A tiny shift. A soft, muffled creak from somewhere above me. At first I didn't react. Old houses relaxed at night. Wood flexed. Pipes settled. I'd heard those noises 1,000 times. But a moment later, another sound followed, gentler, but much more recognizable. A footstep. Slow. Careful. Like someone trying not to make noise. I paused the video. The sudden silence swallowed the room, thick and airless. Another step. I froze completely, blanket half pulled over my chest, breath held in my throat. The sound was coming from the guest room directly above the living room, where nobody had been in months. or I hadn't been all day. I lowered the laptop, every instinct telling me not to make a sound. My mind tried to force out rational explanations, an animal trapped somewhere, something falling off a shelf, a draft moving boxes around. But animals didn't take slow, even steps. My pulse hammered against my ribs. I swallowed hard and finally managed to whisper, "Hello." The house didn't answer. The footsteps stopped. I didn't know if that made it better or worse. I stood up, legs trembling, and backed toward the kitchen, away from the stairs. My phone sat on the counter. I grabbed it, hand shaking so badly I almost dropped it. I didn't call anyone. Instead, I held the phone to my ear and said, loudly and very much on purpose, "Yeah, hi. I think someone's in my house." "Yes, I'm downstairs." "The police are on their way." "Good. Thank you." My voice cracked halfway through, but I hoped whoever was upstairs wouldn't notice. Silence followed. Long, suffocating silence. Then, a single step. Not upstairs. Not pacing. Coming toward me. A careful shift of weight onto the top stair. My chest tightened. My knees almost buckled. I forced myself to back up farther until my spine hit the kitchen counter. Another step. Slow. Deliberate. Heel first, then toe. My phone screen dimmed in my hand, though I wasn't really looking at it anymore. I had my eyes locked on the shadowed staircase across the room, where the darkness pulled at the bottom like thick ink. Step. Step. Whoever or whatever was up there wasn't hurrying, wasn't stumbling, wasn't afraid. They were descending. Calmly. Quietly. One deliberate footstep after another, as if testing each stair. My throat dried instantly. I couldn't get words out. Couldn't keep faking the phone call. My tongue felt glued to the roof of my mouth. The steps continued. Halfway down now. Then a pause. I held my breath until my lungs screamed. The house made no sound at all. The next footstep came so slowly I barely heard it. The creak of wood. The soft brush of a sock or barefoot or something over the carpet runner. Step. I couldn't run. I couldn't hide. The only exit was behind me, but I couldn't bring myself to move and risk drawing attention. Then I saw it. A shape. Just barely visible in the dim glow of the lamp behind me. The faint outline of a leg descending the stairs. Not enough to see detail, but enough to know it was human-shaped. Step. My vision blurred around the edges. My ears rang. I fumbled behind me for something, anything, to hold as a weapon. My hand closed around a wooden spoon lying on the counter, and I almost laughed at the absurdity of it. Step. The shape reached the bottom stair. I couldn't breathe. Couldn't blink. Couldn't think. It stopped completely still, just around the corner, hidden from full view by the banister. The air felt colder, heavier, like the space around me had shrunk. Then something happened that made every organ in my body clench. A shadow stretched across the wall. Not from the lamp or from me. From him. He was standing there, inches beyond the last stair, motionless. The shadow shifted slightly as if he leaned forward, listening. Waiting. I felt tears prick at my eyes, hot and uncontrollable. "Please," I whispered before I could stop myself. The shadow moved. Slightly at first. Then, he stepped into the light. I didn't see his face, not clearly. His hood was pulled low. His clothes were dark. But I saw enough. His hands, both empty, both relaxed, like he wasn't worried about me running, like he didn't expect me to. His head tilted the smallest degree, just enough to acknowledge me. And then he moved. Not rushing, not lunging, just walking toward me with the slow, patient steps of someone who had already decided what would happen next. I dropped the spoon. I turned and sprinted for the back door. I didn't look back. I didn't scream. I burst into the yard barefoot, rain freezing my skin, the night swallowing me whole. I ran 2 houses down before pounding on the neighbor's door, sobbing, begging for help. The police searched my house top to bottom. The upstairs was empty. No signs of entry. No footprints. No one hiding. But on the staircase carpet, halfway down, they found something damp. A single, wet footprint. Too large to be mine. Pointed downward toward the kitchen. Toward me. And when I was finally allowed back inside hours later, shaking and exhausted, the house felt wrong. Violated. Watched. I hadn't been upstairs all day. But someone had. I was supposed to be studying that night. That was the plan. Anyway, finish 2 chapters, outline a paper, maybe treat myself to a late-night bowl of cereal if I didn't fall asleep on top of my laptop first. My roommates were all gone for the weekend, scattered across the state for family visits and concerts and whatever else people with actual social lives did. I had the house to myself for the first time in months. It felt weird at first, the emptiness of it. Too quiet. Every sound I made seemed bigger, like the walls were holding their breath. But after a while, I settled into the stillness. I spread my notes across my bed, put on a low playlist to drown out the hum of the old refrigerator, and tried to convince myself I was being responsible. I was highlighting a paragraph I didn't actually understand when I heard the first tap. Just a tiny click against the window behind me. Sharp, then gone. I didn't turn around. The wind had been rattling things all evening, branches, the loose gutter outside, even the warped screen on the kitchen window. I kept reading. Tap. A little louder. I told myself not to look. If I looked, it would turn into something. My brain was too good at that, building monsters out of shadows. Another tap, followed by a faint, quick scrape. Like something had grazed the glass. Wind, I muttered. Obviously. But then it happened again. Not a tap this time. A drag. A long, deliberate drag, like someone pressing their fingernail to the window and pulling it slowly downward. I went still. The music kept playing softly, but everything else inside me froze. My skin prickled, the tiny hairs at the base of my neck lifting in unison. I turned. The curtain hung still. No silhouette. No flutter of movement. Another drag, longer this time. I stood up before I could talk myself out of it, crossed the room, and pulled the curtain aside in one fast jerk. Nothing. Empty backyard. Dark porch. The motion sensor light had burned out 2 months ago, so all I could see was the faint orange glow from the street lamps filtering between the trees. Rain clouds swallowed the sky whole. But on the glass, the mark remained. A thin, foggy streak curved slightly, running almost the full height of the window. Too straight for wind. Too clean for a branch. It looked like something had touched the glass. Something warm enough to leave a trace in the cool night air. I backed away from the window, heart pounding. It's just condensation, I whispered. Like settling or something. But that made no sense. Condensation didn't drag. I forced myself to turn away and go back to the bed. I picked up my highlighter, pretending my hand wasn't shaking. I told myself I was being dramatic, that I'd scare myself stupid if I kept indulging this. The house creaked once, twice. Then, the sound returned. Not from behind me this time. From behind my other shoulder. The window in the spare room. The one I'd left cracked open earlier to air out the musty smell. Another slow, deliberate drag against glass. Right behind the wall I was facing. I dropped my highlighter. This wasn't the wind. I stepped into the hallway carefully, like sudden movement would attract attention. My breath felt too loud, too harsh. I stared at the dark spare room doorway across from mine, the faint draft brushing the back of my arms. Something dragged along the window again, louder this time, like it wasn't trying to be subtle anymore. I reached for the light switch. Flicked it on. The overhead bulb buzzed to life, flickering once before steadying. The room flooded with warm yellow light. Nothing was there. Just the messy spare bed, the open textbooks on the desk, and the half-open window with its flimsy screen bowing slightly inward. But on the glass, 3 streaks. 3 clean, unmistakable streaks. Parallel. Curved at the top, sharper at the bottom. Finger marks. My pulse stuttered. "No," I whispered. "No, no, no." A soft sound cut me off. Not at the window this time. At the side of the house. A brush. A scrape. Something moving along the siding. Slow. Intentional. Traveling from one window toward another. Whatever it was circling. I slammed the spare room window shut and locked it, stepping back quickly as if the glass might give way. I grabbed my phone with trembling hands, thumb fumbling across the emergency call screen. The scraping stopped. Silence settled over the house, thick and total. I waited. 1 second. 2. Then, a new drag. On the living room window. I choked on a gasp. It was unmistakable now, something moving around the house perimeter, touching window after window, pausing at each one like it was mapping out the interior. Like it was searching. I backed into my bedroom, shutting the door quietly, trying not to breathe too loudly. My fingers hovered over the call button. The dragging shifted again. Closer. Now at the small bathroom window at the end of the hall. Then the kitchen window. Moving faster now, like it knew the layout. Like it knew the order of the rooms. My heart hammered in my throat hard enough to hurt. I pressed the call button. The phone lit up. Then went dark. Dead. I stared at the blank screen, numb. It had been at 70% minutes earlier. A new sound drifted in. Not dragging. Not tapping. Breathing. Close. Just outside. The living room blinds trembled slightly, like someone was pressing their face against them from the outside. I heard a faint exhale. Slow. Wet. Too human to deny. Then one more noise. The front doorknob turning. Gently. Testing. I stumbled backward, my shoulder hitting the wall with a thud. I ran into the bedroom closet and shut the door, biting my fist to keep from screaming. The doorknob stopped. Silence stretched, long and thin. Then, from the living room window, 3 taps. Slow. Perfectly even. Not asking to come in. Announcing that it already knew I was here. I didn't leave the closet until dawn. The police found nothing outside. No footprints in the mud. No signs of forced entry. No fingerprints on the glass. But they didn't clean the windows. So the marks remained. The long, deliberate streaks on the bedroom window. The 3 perfect fingertip trails on the spare room glass. And the smallest one on the living room pane. So faint you'd miss it if you didn't lean close. Made by something pointing inward. I'd always worked late. It wasn't even about deadlines. Night was just the only time my brain felt quiet enough to focus. No emails. No coworkers. No traffic noise bleeding through the windows of my small home office. It was just me, my computer, and the steady hum of the desk lamp. That night was the same as every other. A half-finished cup of coffee on my coaster, 3 tabs of research open, and rain pattering softly outside. The house felt extra still, like the walls were holding their breath. I'd lived alone for nearly 2 years, and the silence no longer bothered me. If anything, I preferred it. Around midnight, I noticed movement in the corner of my screen. Just a flicker in the reflection. A quick, ripple-like shift of something behind me. I thought it was just I strained from staring at the monitor too long, so I blinked a few times and kept typing. A minute later, it happened again. This time, I saw it more clearly, something dark crossing the faint reflection of the hallway behind me. A shadow sliding from one side to the other, too smooth and too tall to be my own. I turned around. Nothing. The hallway stretched into darkness, the light from my office spilling out only a few feet before dissolving into black. The air felt heavier than before. Still, perfectly still. The house was silent except for the rain. I shook it off. I hadn't slept well the night before and figured exhaustion was playing tricks on my eyes. I turned back to the screen, trying to ignore the uneasy tightening in my chest. 10 minutes passed. I was zoning out, staring through the page instead of reading it. Then another flicker. I leaned closer. The reflection on the glossy black border of my monitor showed something I hadn't seen before. A pale shape, partially hidden behind the hallway corner. It looked like a face. Not fully visible, just the edge of it. A cheekbone, the curve of a brow. Someone peeking. Watching me. My heartbeat spiked so fast I actually felt dizzy. I whipped around so hard my chair slammed into the desk behind me. The hallway was empty. Dark. Silent. Motionless. My breathing was too loud now. Sharp, uneven. I stood up from my chair, listening for any shift in air, any footstep, any breath that wasn't mine. Nothing. Still, the reflection had been too clear to dismiss. I reached for the hallway light switch just inside the office, but my hand hesitated. The hallway looked wrong somehow, too dark, too deep. Like the shadows were holding their shape instead of fading naturally. I stepped forward anyway and flipped the light on. The hallway burst into pale yellow illumination, revealing nothing. Just the old framed photos lining the wall, the small rug near the stairs, everything exactly as it should have been. But the relief didn't last. Because as I turned back toward my office chair, the computer screen flickered from a subtle glow to a perfect mirror for just a fraction of a second. And in that reflection, someone was standing behind me. Not in the hallway. In the room. I spun around, stumbling over my own feet, heart slamming so violently it felt like it was cracking against my ribs. But the room was empty. Completely empty. My chest tightened until it hurt. My throat felt thick. The air around me seemed colder, like the temperature had dropped 5 degrees in the past minute. Every instinct in me screamed to get out of the room, out of the house, anywhere but here. but I forced myself to breathe, forced myself to think rationally. I checked the closet, checked under the desk, checked behind the door. Nothing. No sign of forced entry. No open window. No footprints on the carpet. Just me, losing my mind in my own house. I sank back into my chair, pressing both hands to my face. "You're tired," I whispered. "You're imagining things." I reopened the document, determined to finish one more paragraph before giving up for the night. That was when the monitor dimmed again, just for a second. And there, reflected perfectly on the black screen, a head, peeking from the corner of the hallway. Eye level, motionless, staring directly at me. My breath hitched. I couldn't move, couldn't think. The reflection didn't blink, didn't tilt, didn't shift. It just stayed there. Slowly. So slowly. I turned my head toward the hallway. The light was still on, but the corner was empty. I swallowed hard. My hands were shaking so much I had to grip the edge of the desk just to stay grounded. I looked at the screen again. The reflection was gone. I exhaled shakily and reached for the hallway switch to turn the lights even brighter. Before my fingers touched the wall, the hallway light snapped off. Just clicked off. Total darkness swallowed the corridor. I froze. My hand hovered inches from the switch, and in that breathless moment, the darkness felt alive. Pressing. Watching. Heavy enough to make my lungs ache. I didn't dare move. Then, a soft sound emerged from the darkness. Not footsteps. Not breathing. A shuffle. Like someone repositioning their feet. I took one slow step backward into the office. Another shuffle. Closer. My fingers found the door frame. Another shuffle. Closer still. I slammed the office door shut and locked it, chest heaving. I backed away, keeping my eyes glued to the gap beneath the door. Seconds passed. Long. Silent. Then, a shadow drifted across the thin sliver of light. Not walking. Gliding. I grabbed my phone with trembling hands and called 911, stammering through the address, whispering because even my own voice felt too loud in the suffocating stillness. The operator told me to stay where I was. I didn't respond because another shadow slid by the door. Then another. Slow. Purposeful. As if pacing. As if deciding. Minutes dragged like hours until I finally heard pounding on the front door and the officer's voice shouting my name. When I opened the office door, the hallway was empty. Every light in the house turned on. No signs of a break-in. No footprints. Nothing disturbed. But when I sat back at my desk later, surrounded by police officers, lights blazing, adrenaline still crashing through my body, I noticed something on my screen. A smudge print. Oily. Human. Right on the edge of the monitor. As if someone had steadied themselves there, while leaning over my shoulder to watch me work. I'd always prided myself on how calm my house felt at night. I lived on a quiet street, tucked between a wooded lot and a sleepy row of homes where the most exciting thing that ever happened was someone accidentally leaving their garage door open. My dog, Murphy, fit right into the routine, gentle, lazy, snoring through thunderstorms. He was the kind of dog who waited to bark until after the mailman left. Nothing rattled him. Which is why, when he started barking at the back door that night, something inside me went tight and cold. I was in the kitchen making tea, half watching some mindless show streaming on my phone. Murphy had been asleep on the rug near the sink. One minute he was snoring, the next he bolted upright, let out a low whine, and padded toward the sliding back door with his ears pinned back. Then he barked. Not the playful someone's here bark he used when a friend knocked. This one came from deep in his chest, sharp and rhythmic, each one louder than the last. His fur stood up in a jagged line along his spine. I set the mug down slowly, steam curling from the rim. Murphy? Hey, what is it? He didn't look back at me. He was staring directly at the door handle. Growling now. A deep, vibrating sound I had never heard from him in all the years I'd had him. My easygoing, terrified of his own reflection dog was growling as if something on the other side of the glass had walked right up to him. I approached carefully, trying not to let my imagination get ahead of me. Probably a raccoon, I muttered to myself. Or a possum. Or nothing. But the backyard was dark, pitch black, because the motion light had gone out a week earlier and I kept forgetting to replace the bulb. All I could see in the glass was the faint reflection of Murphy's tense body and the dim kitchen behind me. I clicked the lock on the sliding door anyway, just in case. The sound was louder than I expected. Murphy didn't move. His growl deepened, almost a rumble. It's fine, I said softly, resting a hand on his back. He barely seemed to notice. His body was rigid, legs braced, eyes locked onto the door handle. Which hadn't moved. Which was just sitting there, a piece of metal I'd touched 1,000 times. But the way he stared at it, I swear it felt like something was on the other side staring back. I stepped away, giving him space, trying to convince myself my heart wasn't thudding as loudly as it seemed. I made it 2, maybe 3 steps before Murphy let out a bark so loud and sudden I flinched hard enough to knock my hip into the counter. Then the handle turned. At first it was subtle. A tiny twitch, barely a nudge. Like someone testing it from the outside. Then it turned again, harder this time. The metal jostled in its housing. My breath caught. Murphy lunged forward, slamming his front paws against the door, barking violently. The glass shook under his weight. The handle jerked again, fast, like whoever was outside panicked at the explosion of noise. No, 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 the words tumbled out without thought. I grabbed Murphy's collar, but he was braced so hard against the floor that pulling him felt like trying to move a sandbag. His teeth were bared now, something I'd never seen before. His whole body vibrated with a primal, furious sound. The handle twisted sharply, then stopped. I froze, holding onto Murphy as the silence grew thick. The handle didn't move again. Murphy's barking slowed into deep, angry growls, his gaze still fixed. My phone was on the counter. My first instinct was to grab it and call the police, but the idea of turning my back on the door for even a second made my skin crawl. I dragged Murphy backward inch by inch until we were far enough away that I could stretch an arm out and snatch my phone from the charger. I dialed 911 with trembling hands. My dog is barking at the back door, and the handle just turned. Someone's trying to get in. The dispatcher told me to stay inside, stay calm, officers were on their way. Murphy hadn't blinked once. His growl vibrated through the air like electricity. Then, another sound. A soft scrape. Not at the door. Above it. My eyes darted upward. The small window panel above the sliding door, one too high for Murphy to reach, was foggy. Slowly, as if someone's breath was warming the glass from outside. Then a shape pressed against it. A forehead, just visible through the warped condensation. A distorted outline of a head, too close to the glass to be anything else. My lungs seized. Murphy went wild, barking furiously, launching himself at the door again. The shape jerked back out of view, the fog fading slightly where it had been warmed. I backed away fast, knees buckling. "Please hurry," I whispered into the phone. A thud shook the door. Then another. Like someone testing the glass again, harder this time. I clutched Murphy, who was still losing his mind, barking like he was ready to tear through the door. The hairs on his back stood straight up. My vision tumbled. A louder crack hit the frame. I screamed. Murphy lunged again. Then, silence. Just like that. Murphy froze mid-crawl. His body stiffened. His head tilted slightly, ears pricked. Listening. The air felt suddenly thin. Then I heard it. Footsteps. Soft ones. Backing away from the door. Moving across the deck. Not running. Just leaving. Deliberately. The dispatcher kept asking if I was still there. I couldn't answer. I slid down to the floor, hugging Murphy, trying to breathe. When the police arrived 15 minutes later, the deck was empty. No footprints, they said the rain had washed everything away. No signs of forced entry. Nothing disturbed except the faint, warm oval still fading on the high window panel. The fog mark. The spot where a forehead had rested. Where someone had leaned close enough to breathe on the glass. Murphy stayed pressed against me the whole night, trembling every time the house creaked. He never barked at the back door before that night. And he's never gone near it since. I'd been telling myself for weeks that I needed to stop staying up so late, but old habits die slow. Most nights, I wound up on the couch long after midnight, half watching videos while pretending I'd go to bed after this one. My house always felt different at night, quieter, heavier, like all the daytime noise had drained out of it. Still, after living alone for nearly 6 years, I'd grown used to the silence. Comfortable in it, even. That night was ordinary in every possible way. Leftover pizza. A documentary paused mid-sentence. My phone at 14% because I never charged it until it screamed at me. I was scrolling aimlessly, eyes half-lidded, when a notification popped up. Unknown number. Stop moving. I'm almost inside. I snorted out a confused laugh. Definitely a prank. Maybe a wrong number. Maybe one of those mass spam texts designed to scare people into clicking something. I didn't bite. I set the phone face down on the coffee table and stretched. The house groaned the way it always did when the temperature dropped. The air conditioner ticked off with a low shudder. Everything normal. I'd almost forgotten about the message when another sound threaded itself through the quiet. A soft thud. From the garage. I sat up. My garage was attached but rarely used. I kept tools in there, old holiday decorations, a bike with 2 flat tires. I hadn't opened that door all day. There was no reason, absolutely no reason, for anything to be moving in there. I waited, heartbeat climbing a shaky ladder in my chest. Another thud. Softer this time. As if something or someone was testing the walls. Feeling them out. I grabbed my phone again, more annoyed than scared, ready to block the number. But the screen lit up with a new message before I could tap anything. A photo. Taken through my living room window. Through the window I was sitting next to. The angle was crooked, slightly downward, like whoever took it was holding their phone at chest height. The reflection of the glass blurred parts of the image, but I could clearly see my couch, my coffee table, me. Leaning back, phone in hand, unaware someone was outside in the dark snapping photos. Below the picture, the caption read, "You're not alone." My breath left me in a painful, shallow gasp. For a moment, my body refused to move. Every muscle pulled taut like I was bracing for a crash. Then instinct kicked in. I lunged off the couch, backing away from the window so fast my heel slid on the carpet. My mind raced. Prank? Stalker? Someone messing around? No. No, this wasn't normal. This wasn't funny. Someone had been close enough to the house to take that photo without me noticing. I crept toward the far wall, putting as much distance as possible between myself and any window. The living room suddenly felt too open, too exposed. Shadows stretched long across the floor. The streetlight outside flickered once, then steadied. My phone buzzed again. My hands trembled so badly I almost dropped it. Unknown number, don't hide. I can hear you. I looked at the garage door, the thin wooden one connecting the house to the space beyond. The metal latch vibrated faintly. Not enough to make noise. Just enough to tell me something was pressing against it from the other side. A soft scrape. Then, a slow, deliberate knock. 3 taps. My throat tightened painfully. My breathing came in short, shallow bursts. I wanted to call 911, but my fingers wouldn't obey. I wanted to run, but my legs felt like wet sand. The knocking stopped. Silence thickened the air until it felt like syrup. Then my phone buzzed once more. Another photo. This one taken from inside the garage. The angle was from behind the small window set in the upper panel, looking directly into the house through the crack beneath the connecting door. And there I was, half crouched beside the hallway entrance, staring at my phone like it was saving me. The caption beneath it. "I told you. I'm almost inside." A strangled sound escaped me, something between a gasp and a sob. I backed into the hallway, nearly tripping over the console table. The nearest exit was the front door, but it was on the other side of the living room, past the big window where the first photo had been taken. The back door led to a fenced yard with one working light. But the garage was closer to the backyard than the street. If someone was really out there, they could trap me. I didn't have time to think. Only to move. I sprinted to the kitchen, grabbed the biggest knife I owned, and clutched it so tightly my knuckles hurt. My phone buzzed again, but I ignored it. I couldn't look. I couldn't afford to. The house creaked again. Not the usual settling. This one had weight behind it. A footstep. Coming from the garage door. Then another. Slow. Heavy. Purposeful. I held my breath and pressed my back against the kitchen counter. The connecting door rattled quietly, almost thoughtfully, like someone testing the frame. Then, the lights went out. Every bulb in the house blinked off at once, plunging the rooms into suffocating darkness. Only my phone screen glowed faintly from across the room where I dropped it. I didn't move. Couldn't. The darkness grew thicker, and from somewhere behind the connecting door, I heard the faintest whisper of air. Like a slow exhale. Then, the latch clicked. Not fully. Just enough. Just enough to let me know it was being undone from the other side. I bolted. I didn't think, didn't look, just grabbed my phone on the way to the front door, fumbled with the locks, and threw myself into the night air. Barefoot, panicked, sprinting down the street with my throat tight and my thoughts scrambled. I didn't stop until I reached my neighbor's porch and pounded hard enough to bruise my fists. They let me in. Called the police. stayed beside me as I shook uncontrollably. The officers found my house locked up tight. Garage empty. No footprints. No forced entry. Nothing disturbed. Nothing missing. Except my phone, now in my hand, held one unread message. Sent 2 minutes after I ran. Unknown number, you should have stayed still. I was already inside. I hadn't realized how loud an empty house could be until after the breakup. It wasn't even a big house, just a 2-bedroom rental on a quiet cul-de-sac, but once he moved out, every small noise echoed like it was searching for someone to answer it. I kept the TV on most nights just to fill the space, even if I wasn't watching. That night, though, I'd fallen asleep on the couch with the screen still glowing faintly, casting warped blue shapes on the walls. When the knocking started, I thought it was part of a dream. 3 slow, heavy knocks. I jolted upright, blanket tangled around my legs. My phone on the coffee table read 2:03 a.m. For a few seconds, I just sat there, heart drumming in my ears, waiting for another sound: rain, wind, a car, something that would tell me it wasn't real. Another knock. Louder. I stood up carefully, pulse spiking. No one visited me unannounced, especially not at 2 a.m. I walked to the front door, staying slightly to the side instead of standing in front of the peephole. My voice shook when I called out. Who is it? Silence for 3 seconds. Then a man answered, his voice low and steady. I just need to talk to the man of the house. My stomach dropped. There's no man here, I managed. You have the wrong address. A pause. Then another knock, harder this time, sharp enough to rattle the frame. I need to talk to him, the man repeated. My throat tightened. You've got the wrong place. Go away. The knocking grew aggressive, 3 fast blows that made me jump back. The wood thudded under his fist like he was testing how sturdy it was. Go away. I shouted, fear ticking up into anger. I'm calling the police. His reply came instantly. Go ahead, he said. I already talked to them. Everything inside me froze. The refrigerator hummed. The TV buzzed weakly in the background. My own breathing felt too loud. I stared at the door handle, half expecting it to twist. Then, a sound from the side of the house. Not at the front door. At the back. A faint clink of metal, then the soft scrape of someone testing the sliding glass door. My entire body went cold. I darted to the kitchen, bare feet silent on the laminate floor. My phone shook in my hands as I dialed 911, whispering into the receiver, terrified the man might hear me through the glass. There's someone trying to break in, I hissed. He was at the front door, now he's at the back. I'm alone, please hurry. The dispatcher kept me talking, voice calm and steady, but I barely processed the words. I peeked around the corner toward the dark dining room where the sliding back door stood. A shadow moved behind the curtain. Tall. Still. Clearly human. I see you, the man said through the glass, calmly, like we were discussing the weather. The curtain rippled as he tried the handle again. He jiggled it once, twice, then harder on the 3rd attempt, the metal clacking in its frame. It's locked, he muttered. Why'd you lock it? My knees nearly gave out. I backed deeper into the kitchen, gripping a knife from the block even though my hand trembled too badly to hold it steady. The dispatcher kept talking. Officers are en route. Stay hidden. Don't confront him. I crouched behind the island, phone pressed to my ear, heart hammering so violently it made my vision pulse. Then the sliding door stopped rattling. Silence. Not a good silence. A loaded one. A moment later, the man's voice floated softly through the glass. You shouldn't be alone here. My breath hitched. Footsteps moved along the deck, slow, deliberate, toward the side gate. I heard it squeak open, then slam shut. The footsteps continued along the house, toward the front. He was circling. I crawled toward the hallway, about to run for the bathroom to lock myself in, when the doorbell rang. Once. Then again. Then a third time, each ring more impatient. Open up, he called. We're not done talking. I didn't answer. I didn't breathe. I pressed myself into the narrow space between the washer and dryer and the laundry nook, trying to make myself as small as possible. Seconds stretched, each one worse than the last. Then the front door rattled violently. The deadbolt shook as the man tested it again, harder this time. The frame groaned. Why are you doing this? He asked. His tone was almost conversational now, which somehow terrified me even more. I said I just needed to talk. The dispatcher whispered that officers were turning onto my street. As if he heard her, the man's fist slammed against the front door one last time, a booming, furious strike that echoed through the small house. Then, silence. Real silence. Footsteps fading down the porch. Distant running. By the time the police arrived, the man was gone. They searched the yard, the street, the side of the house. Nothing. No footprints on the porch. No smudges on the glass. No cameras pointed that way. Nothing left behind except the echo of his voice still lodged in my ears. But they did find something. A folded piece of paper wedged between the slats of the back deck. It was blank on one side. On the other, written in blocky, uneven handwriting. I know he's gone. You shouldn't be here alone. I'll come back when you're ready to talk. I moved out the next morning. I'd been trying to fix my sleep schedule for weeks, but on nights like that one, I always caved to the temptation of staying up too late. I'd read until my eyes blurred, then finally forced myself to turn off the lamp and sink into the dark. My apartment was small, a one-bedroom box with thin walls, old pipes, and a heater that groaned like it resented doing its job. But it was mine. Quiet. Predictable. That night, I'd gone to bed just after midnight. The sheets were cold, the room dim except for the faint red glow of the alarm clock. I lay there on my back, listening to the building settle, those tiny cracks and sighs I'd stopped noticing months ago. I was just drifting into that soft, warm haze before sleep when I heard it. A sound from the kitchen. Not a random thump or pipe knock. Not the fridge humming. Something deliberate. A faint shuffle. Then another. I froze, breath catching halfway out of my chest. My first thought was rat. The building wasn't exactly new. But rats didn't open drawers. Because that's what I heard next, the metallic shick of a drawer sliding open. Then another. I lay perfectly still, staring up at the ceiling as my pulse hammered in my ears. My bedroom door was cracked open, leaving a thin slice of darkness beyond it. The kitchen sat at the end of the hall, out of sight but not out of earshot. Another drawer slid open. And then the unmistakable sound of cutlery clinking together. Not loud. Not frantic. Someone was picking through it quietly, like they were trying to avoid making noise, but didn't care if a little slipped through. My mouth went dry. I turned my head slightly, barely an inch, toward the far end of the room where my phone lay on the dresser. Too far to reach without getting out of bed. Too far to reach without making noise. I considered pretending I hadn't noticed anything, just closing my eyes, breathing slow, hoping whoever was out there would leave. But the rummaging continued. A soft scrape. A metallic click. A pause. Footsteps. Slow ones. Padded. Barely there. Moving away from the kitchen. Toward the hall. Toward me. A cold wave rolled under my skin, freezing every nerve. I slid one hand silently beneath the blanket, fingers curling so tight into the sheets my knuckles ached. My breathing grew shallow, deliberately quiet. The footsteps reached the hall. The floorboards creaked, ones I knew by heart. One near the pantry. One in front of the bathroom. And then the long, low groan of the board just 3 feet from my bedroom door. My vision tumbled. My mind ricocheted between possibilities, home invasion, nightmare, hallucination, but none made sense. None explained how someone had gotten in without me hearing. The footsteps stopped. Silence pressed in from all directions, thick and suffocating. Even the building seemed to hold still. Then, the doorknob twitched. Just the smallest movement. Enough to click against the latch. Enough to send a jolt of terror straight through my spine. I clamped my teeth together to keep them from chattering. Another twitch. Slow. Testing. The metal clicked lightly in the silent room. I imagined what whoever he was, might see through the gap, darkness, the shape of my bed, maybe the faint outline of me frozen beneath the blanket. I wanted to scream. I wanted to run. But if I moved, the bed springs would squeak. If I screamed, the sound would trap me here with him. My phone was still across the room, glowing faintly in the dark. If he got the door open, there would be no time. None. The knob turned again, this time with a little more confidence. My breath hitched. My mind raced with any possible escape. The window? Too loud. The closet? Too obvious. The bathroom? No lock. The knob turned halfway, metal scraping against metal. Then, footsteps again. 2 steps. Moving away from the door. I didn't understand. Why leave now? The footsteps padded down the hall, slow, steady, unhurried. The same deliberate rhythm as before. Then the kitchen drawer slid shut. Then the front door latch clicked. The faint whoosh of air as the door opened. Then closed. My chest constricted so painfully I nearly sobbed. I waited. 30 seconds. A minute. 2. Only when I was certain the apartment was empty again did I finally throw the blanket off and lunge for my phone. My hand shook so badly I misdialed twice before getting 911. The police arrived fast. They swept the place, checked the locks, the windows, the fire escape. Nothing was forced. Nothing broken. But something was missing from the kitchen drawer. A knife. The largest one. And there, on the floor beside the drawer, the officers found a wet footprint. One bare foot. Not mine. Pointed directly toward my bedroom door. They asked if I wanted to stay somewhere else that night. I didn't even pack a bag. I just left. I'd lived in that apartment building for 3 years, long enough to memorize which neighbors came home late, which ones fought loudly, which ones cooked spicy food that made the hallway smell like peppers for hours. The place had its quirks, thin walls, flickering lights, ancient plumbing, but it was predictable. Safe, in its own creaky way. The unit next to mine, though, had been empty for months. The last tenant moved out in early spring, and maintenance never seemed in a hurry to renovate it. Some nights I'd forget it was vacant until I stepped into the hallway and felt how the air outside their door was always colder, stiller, like the apartment behind it wasn't just empty, like it had been abandoned. That night, I was curled up on the couch with a half-watched movie playing quietly, my cat asleep at my feet. It was close to midnight, the building quiet enough that I could hear the hum of the vending machine down the hall. Then, someone knocked on the vacant apartment's door. Not a subtle knock. Not a hesitant one. 3 sharp raps. I muted the TV and sat up, listening. Maybe maintenance was checking the place. But at midnight? And who knocks before entering a vacant unit? Another knock. Same rhythm. Then another. And another. I felt a tiny prickling at the base of my neck. The knocks kept coming, not frantic, not angry. Just steady. Almost patient. My cat lifted her head, ears twitching. Probably a delivery person at the wrong unit, I whispered, as if she needed reassurance. Happens all the time. But delivery people didn't knock for minutes straight without calling out. They didn't knock without checking the number on the door. And they definitely didn't persist after getting no reply from a long empty apartment. The knocking continued. A dull, repetitive beat echoing through the thin wall that separated the vacant unit from mine. Every knock vibrated faintly under my feet. I stood, pacing toward my own door, listening more closely. The knocks had a strange cadence to them, too evenly spaced, like someone keeping time. Then suddenly, they stopped. Silence hit so abruptly the air felt sucked out of the hallway. I let out a shaky breath I hadn't realized I was holding. Finally, I muttered. They figured it out. I turned back toward the couch. My doorbell rang. 5 times in a row. Not spaced apart. Not tentative. 5 rapid chimes, one after the other, like someone slapping their whole palm against the button. My heart slammed against my ribs so hard it hurt. My cat bolted under the coffee table, tail puffed out. I edged toward the door, feet silent on the carpet. My brain scrambled through possibilities. Maintenance? A neighbor? A drunk tenant? But nobody sane rings a doorbell like that in the middle of the night. I pressed one eye to the peephole. No one was there. Just the empty hallway stretching dim under the emergency lights. I kept staring, breath fogging lightly against the cold door. Then, a whisper. Right on the other side of the wood. I know you're watching. I jerked away from the door so fast I stumbled into the opposite wall, hand clamped over my mouth to keep any sound in. My entire body shook. My pulse throbbed in my throat, too loud, too fast. Someone was out there. Standing close enough to whisper into the door. Close enough that their breath might still be warm against it. I backed down the hallway toward the bedroom, grabbing my phone with trembling fingers. I dialed 911, voice barely steady enough to explain what happened. The dispatcher told me to lock the door, stay quiet, officers were on the way. Lock the door. I stared at it from across the room. The deadbolt was still turned. The chain was still latched. I forced myself to tiptoe back toward the entryway, moving slow enough that the floorboards didn't creak. The door loomed ahead of me, a tall, dark silhouette against the faint glow of the living room lamp. I reached for the lock. And froze. Someone's shadow moved under the door. A pair of feet. Standing completely still. Facing inward. I staggered back, nearly tripping over the rug. I bit down on a scream, dropping into a crouch beside the shoe rack. The shadow didn't shift. Didn't step away. Didn't even sway. Just waited. The dispatcher kept talking in my ear, her voice distant, thin, like I was underwater. Officers are 3 minutes out. Stay where you are. 3 minutes felt like forever. My eyes stayed fixed on the thin slice of shadow beneath the door. My breathing grew shallow, barely there. Even my cat stayed silent under the coffee table, her eyes wide and unblinking. Then, the shadow moved. Slowly, as if whoever was out there was leaning down. Leaning closer. A light breath passed through the crack at the bottom, fluttering the edge of the welcome mat. Then another whisper, so soft it barely existed. Let me in. I clamped a hand over my mouth, shaking violently. Every instinct shouted at me to run, to hide, to do anything but sit there frozen. The door handle twitched. Once. Twice. Testing the lock. I scrambled backward on all fours, retreating into the bedroom and shutting myself inside. I curled behind the bed, knees to my chest, knife from the bedside drawer shaking in my hand. For several seconds, I heard nothing. Then the faintest sound traveled through the apartment. Footsteps. Not going away from my door. Going toward the vacant unit. Away from me. Toward the place where the knocking had begun. My mind spun, were there two people? Did he think the man of the house lived next door? Or worse, was he circling back? Sirens finally broke through the night, speeding down the street. Flashing lights strobed through my blinds. Doors slammed. Officers called out. When I opened my apartment door for them, the hallway was empty. But they found something. On the vacant unit's door. Fresh scratches. As if someone had been dragging their nails down the wood. And on my own welcome mat, barely visible unless the light hit it just right. A partial footprint. Left foot. Bare. Pointed toward my door. I'd never liked the basement. Even in daylight it felt wrong, cold in a way that didn't match the rest of the house, with shadows that settled into corners like they had weight. But it was where the laundry machines were, and where the breaker panel was, and where the old water heater groaned like a smoker clearing his throat. So I learned to tolerate it. Nights were when it bothered me most. The whole house quieted, and the basement seemed to hum beneath it like a second heartbeat. Usually I ignored it. Usually I went about my evening pretending the bottom floor wasn't there at all. That night, I was settling in on the couch with a bowl of reheated chili, half watching some detective show, the kind where every scene was neon lit and nobody slept. I turned the heat up because the wind was rattling the windows. A normal night. Simple. Quiet. Then I heard it. A faint beeping. Not the smoke detector's shrill screech. Something lower. Shorter. Almost polite. Beep. Pause. Beep. Pause. It took my brain a moment to place it. The carbon monoxide detector. In the basement. My first reaction was annoyance. It was an old unit I'd been meaning to replace the battery for months. Probably finally dying. But the beeping kept going. Even, steady, soft. Not frantic. Not the sound of a dying battery. The sound of a breathing hazard, according to every safety pamphlet I'd ever seen. I stood there in the living room, one hand on the back of the couch, listening. The air felt normal. I didn't feel dizzy or sick or strange. But my chest tightened anyway. Carbon monoxide was silent. Invisible. People never noticed until it was too late. With each beep, the basement felt more present. I grabbed my phone and stuck it in my pocket just in case. I flipped on the basement lights from the top of the stairs. They flickered twice before humming to life, casting their usual pale, sickly glow on the concrete steps. The beeping grew louder. I headed down, gripping the railing harder than necessary. When I reached the bottom, the beeping stopped, just cut off mid-cycle. I frowned and stepped forward, scanning the room. The detector was mounted high on the wall next to the water heater. Except, no, it wasn't. The mounting bracket was empty. I turned slowly. The detector lay smashed on the floor. Plastic cracked. Wires exposed. As if someone had ripped it down and thrown it. A cold pulse ran through my body. Carbon monoxide detectors didn't fall like that. And they didn't smash themselves. I stepped closer, crouching. The pieces were scattered, not dropped. Scattered. As if something or someone had stomped on it. I straightened, trying to swallow the rising wave of wrongness. My fingers trembled as I pulled out my phone to use its flashlight. The basement lights suddenly felt too dim, too far away from the floor. The beam swept across boxes, the laundry machines, the storage shelves, and then froze on the concrete. Footprints. Clear ones, stamped in a faint trail of dust. Leading across the floor. Not mine. I was barefoot. These prints had been made by boots. Heavy ones. Deep depressions in the dust. Heel, arch, toe perfectly formed. They led behind the water heater. My stomach flipped. I took one step backward without meaning to. My hand brushed the laundry machine, and the metal felt ice cold. The prints continued far enough that I couldn't see where they ended unless I moved closer. My flashlight beam hit the wall on the water heater, but the space behind it was too narrow, too dark. Just a sliver of shadow. I didn't want to go closer. Every instinct screamed not to. I called out anyway, voice tiny in the cavernous room. Hello? Nothing. Not even a rustle. Just the soft hum of the light bulb overhead. I tried again, louder. If someone's down here, I'm calling the police. My voice shook so badly the words barely made it out. Still nothing. But the footprints were real. The smash detector was real. And suddenly I realized something that made my skin crawl. Carbon monoxide detectors only beep if they detect gas. I wasn't dizzy. I wasn't lightheaded, which meant it hadn't gone off on its own. Someone had triggered it to lure me downstairs. My phone buzzed in my hand, nearly making me drop it. A text from an unknown number lit the screen. Still upstairs? My breath fractured. I bolted up the stairs so fast I slammed my shoulder against the wall. The light flickered overhead as I reached the top, and just before I shut the basement door, I heard something. A soft scrape. Like someone shifting their weight on concrete. I threw the deadbolt across the basement door and ran for the front entryway. I yanked a chair under the knob just in case and dialed 911 with trembling fingers. The dispatcher kept asking questions I couldn't fully answer. Someone was down there. Someone had been in my house long enough to remove the detector, smash it, walk around. Someone had been close enough to my bedroom door last night to hear me walk past the stairs. Officers arrived within minutes, sirens bursting the quiet open. They swept the house first, then the basement. I stood outside with one of them, arms wrapped around myself, barely registering the cold. 2 more officers came up from the basement a moment later. It's clear, one said, but his expression wasn't calm. Then another officer added, we found something, though. He held up a boot print lifted with tape. Huge. Deep. Fresh. too fresh. We also found the back window unlatched, he said. Looks like someone used it recently. I nodded numbly, though the words dissolved as soon as he spoke them. Because I understood something none of them had said. The footprints had led behind the water heater. But none had led back out. Whoever had been down there hadn't left when the police arrived. They'd left earlier. When the detector first beeped. When they heard me get out of bed. When they knew I'd come down alone. I didn't go back inside that night. But sometimes, when I think about the smashed detector and the empty space behind the water heater, a thought occurs to me that I can't shake. Boot prints aren't the only thing dust can show. And I never saw a second set of footprints. The ones that should have led the person away. I'd been trying to convince myself that living alone wasn't as unnerving as everyone said. The townhouse wasn't big, just 2 floors, creaky stairs, a cramped kitchen, but it was mine. After years of roommates, the silence felt like a luxury. I could play music whenever I wanted, leave dishes soaking without guilt, let laundry pile up like a slowly growing threat. The quiet was comforting. Usually. That night, I got home late, dropped my bag by the door, and noticed a package sitting on my doormat. No delivery truck outside. No footsteps on the walkway. Just a plain cardboard box with my name written in thick black marker across the top. Handwritten. No label. No return address. My first thought was that a friend had dropped off something. But none of my friends would scribble my full name like that, not first and last. Not in blocky letters that looked a little too careful. I picked up the box. It was light. Something slid inside, shifting with a dull weight. I carried it to the kitchen and set it on the counter. For a long moment, I just stared at it. My fridge hummed. Outside, wind rattled the loose gutter. Everything felt normal except for that stupid box. Just open it, I muttered. It's probably nothing. I grabbed a knife, sliced the tape, and lifted the lid. Inside was a single cell phone. Old model. Cheap. Plastic already scuffed. Its screen was dark and reflective, like an unblinking eye staring back at me. Then it lit up. Ringing. No caller ID, just a no number. I didn't touch it at first. I watched it vibrate against the cardboard like something alive. My pulse thudded in time with the ringtone. On the 4th ring, I answered. I don't know why. Reflex, maybe. Or fear. Hello? Silence. I almost hung up. Then a voice whispered, close to the mic, so soft I could feel the breath behind it. Don't hang up. I'm in your house. The words didn't make sense at first. They sank in slowly, like poison. What? My own voice shattered on the way out. Who is this? The voice didn't answer. But somewhere above me, a floorboard creaked. Loud enough to hear through the phone. Loud enough to hear through the ceiling. My entire body locked. The phone stayed pressed to my ear, suddenly much heavier than it should have been. This wasn't a prank. Someone was upstairs. Listen to me, I whispered, not sure who I was talking to anymore. I'm calling the police. The voice on the line exhaled softly, almost amused. You won't make it to your front door. I backed up until my spine hit the refrigerator. My hands were shaking so hard I almost dropped the phone. I forced myself to inhale, then exhale, slow and silent. Think. Was the back door locked? Yes. Were the windows? I checked them earlier. Yes, but upstairs. Upstairs was dark, and full of shadows, and filled with places someone could hide. Another creak above me, closer to the stairs this time. I muted the phone, slipped it into my pocket, and tiptoed through the kitchen. Don't run. Running makes noise. Every sound in the house felt amplified. My heartbeat, my breath, the thrum of blood in my ears. I moved toward the front hallway, reaching for the deadbolt with trembling fingers. A soft tap hit the floor at the top of the stairs. Something shifting its weight. My breath caught in my throat. Then, another sound. A step. Slow. Deliberate. Descending. I fumbled with the lock, my fingers slipping. The bolt clicked loud enough to echo. Too loud. The steps paused, then quickened. I threw the door open and sprinted onto the porch. The cold air slapped me awake. I didn't stop to look back, didn't stop to close the door, just bolted across the yard into the street, barefoot and shaking. The phone still in my pocket lit up again, vibrating against my leg. I answered without stopping. Please, I gasped into the mic, I'm outside. I'm gone. Leave me alone. The voice didn't whisper this time. It laughed. A quiet, breathy sound that crawled under my skin. You think you got out? My steps faltered. House lights flickered behind me through the open doorway, down the hall, up the stairs. Then, a silhouette appeared at the window of my bedroom. Tall. Still. Watching. My stomach dropped. He had been upstairs. He really had. But the voice on the phone whispered one last thing, cold and close. I told you not to hang up. The window silhouette lifted something. A second phone. Identical to the one in my hand. My blood went ice cold. The man in the window raised his other hand and waved. Slowly, deliberately. I ran until my lungs burned, until my legs shook, until I reached a neighbor's porch and collapsed. The police swept my house. They found muddy footprints on the stairs. A window forced open on the second floor. The cardboard box discarded beside the bed. But the man was gone. And the identical phone he'd held? Also gone. The only thing left was the one still in my pocket. It hasn't rung again. Not yet.